Yeah, so this is a series in the series of Local Leadership Academy webinars that we've been having for the past couple of months. And today the topic in discussion is going to be on conflict. So maybe this is just the agenda and how we are going to have the sequence. So I will introduce Mr. Bijay Kumar, who's our Executive Director, and he'll provide us some introductory remarks. And after that, I will give a short brief about the topic of conflict. Then after that, we will have a presentation by Mr. Mohammed Kasim, who's from the Somali Non-State Actors Coalition, SONSAC, to be followed by Mr. Jean Bosco Rumongi. I've just talked to him and he's gotten delayed in traffic, but he's on his way. So in the meantime, as we wait for him to join us, Mr. Kasim is going to speak first, and then Mr. Rumongi will join soon after. Then after that, we'll have a Q&A, and then the last 5 minutes will be on conclusion and overview of the next webinars on forced displacements. Maybe what I could also do before I begin, we have a Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. So even as we're discussing and even as we're presenting, may I just suggest that if you have any burning questions, if you could just put them on the Q&A section, and we'll be able to follow up with the questions. So with that, I think I'd just like to do a brief introduction. As I mentioned, Mr. Bijay Kumar is our current Executive Director for GNDR. Bijay has a long track record in humanitarian and development work, particularly in the disaster risk reduction sector. He has considerable experience in leading and managing civil society organizations and networks, having gained a lot of hands-on experience working in Africa, Europe, South Asia, and the Southeast Asia. Bijay is a strong advocate of shifting power from the international system to community-led capacities, preparedness, and response facilitated by local organization. He's also very passionate promoter of human rights and people power. This is both in policy, advocacy, and implementation. Bijay has joined GNDR in September 2018. So with that, maybe I'd like to welcome Bijay. If you have, Bijay, welcome to the floor, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Marlene. Thanks for inviting me. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, friends who are attending this. I take this opportunity to thank the Local Leadership Academy colleagues who could actually conceptualize this. These are fantastic initiatives which brings us together to strengthen our own capacity by using our own resources among ourselves. That's the foundation of the thinking of the Local Leadership Academy, that actually strengthen the capacity of the frontline by using our own capacity, by sharing it among ourselves. This is a fantastic subject to touch upon. As all of us we know, conflict is on increase all over the world. We see that every day, and we see the impact of the conflict every day. More importantly, when the conflict is happening, the so-called natural hazards or so-called natural disasters caused by so-called natural hazards, they start creating havoc in those countries. As the statistics suggest, there are 58% of the death because of the climate-induced and hazards like earthquakes. They kill 58% of the deaths happen in those countries which are more fragile. They are the 30 tough fragile countries contribute to 58% of the death. It's a big number. And the simple thing for us to understand that the risk faced by the communities is multiple and is also systemic. As we understand from the various research we did, including the views from the frontline, the people are experiencing multiple risks. They're exposed to multiple risks. And each risk that they are exposed to are interconnected to others. So there's a systemic relationship. So one risk is increasing the other risk. Another risk is again becoming the cause. So it is almost like a concomitant relationship between the various risks. So when the conflict happens, the conflict as a risk then interacts with the climate-induced risk, interacts with the socio-cultural risk like the gender, interacts with the food insecurity, interacts with urbanization, interacts with the host of other risks that are present, and the impact is higher. That's the first thing that I just wanted to say. The second thing I just wanted to say, that there is, as we know, there is always a disproportionate impact of disaster, and conflict combined with the natural hazards that create a disproportionate impact on the people. All the people are not necessarily experiencing the same level of exposure or same intensity of the disaster. So let's say, for example, women, children, person with disability, the minority groups, the gay and lesbian communities, they are experiencing the intensity of the disaster, which is that their experience is much higher than others. So that's the second thing I just wanted to say. The third thing, perhaps Mr. Muhammad will agree with me, that we have an assumption that whenever there is a disaster, we depend on the state, and we depend on state's role that we say is to respect, protect, fulfill, and promote the rights of the people. So we depend on that role of the state. But the fact is, in many of the contexts where we see the conflict, the state role is actually challenged. Either it takes sides with the conflicting groups, or it itself creates the conflict. The state itself is creating the conflict. So that avenue of using the state as a mechanism to initiate the first response, or preparing the communities, or is mobilizing the resources, or giving the resources to the affected communities, is usually challenged. So that is the third thing that I just wanted to say. Number four, that if we see this, when they interact, then we see that it's the international community gets in to the rescue of the conflict affected communities, then the peace building processes happens. But we rarely see the humanitarian, development, and peace building work interacting. They rarely interact. So what actually this triple nexus that is being talked of, we have been seeing that the triple nexus is critical, but there is quite a bit of experience among the members of GNDR, but as a network, we haven't gathered that experience together. We have anecdotal and we have some sort of divided experience of or expertise that exists in GNDR, among the GNDR members, but we have not been able to pull those experiences together. Plus, there's a need to see how we understand and better address the triple nexus: humanitarian, development, and peace building. So these are the triple nexus that we should see how that actually relates. Now, all these things brings us to the priority that we're actually talking of. Can we actually discuss the conflict and disaster risk reduction, particularly risk-informed conflict transformation programming? Can we understand it? Can we actually build on the experience of some of our members who are working in the difficult context, like in Somalia or in Iraq or in Afghanistan? Can we actually build on their experience and see how we also look at the various literature which is available to see how we can come up with a strategy that is good for bringing the perspective of the communities most at risk. Now, as you would actually know, perhaps, we have partnered with ISS. ISS is the Institute for Social Studies in Netherlands, in The Hague. There we actually worked with them, where they developed a curriculum, a course, what they call as disasters, when disaster meets conflict. Yeah. So I will actually encourage you to look at that course. They have what is known as Massive Open Online Course, MOOC. So I would actually request my colleagues to put the link of the MOOC and share the link with all of you. So it will be useful to see how you make use of the MOOC that ISS is doing, that is led by one of our supervisory board member of Stitching GNDR, Professor Thia. She is actually leading this course, and I believe this is free of cost. Perhaps you can actually make use of it. And that is something that can be an extension of the local leadership academy's intervention and linkages. All the best. I am actually looking forward to hearing from all of you, and all the best, Marlene, and all the best, Daniela, and the team who have conceptualized the local leadership academy. All the best to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, BJ, and thank you for your extensive introduction. I think I would say that you've summarized our whole webinar in a few minutes. Maybe just to go through a few, I think of a few points that I was able to capture, that conflict interacts with a host of risk and the impact is higher. And I think the other point that you reiterated is that there's disappropriate impact of risk on people, groups, and where we find groups experiencing intensity of disaster. Then we have the assumption that we depend on state or state role to protect us. And this is not normally accurate, like in especially in some of the cases where if it's the state who is actually instigating like the conflict. Then you've said that there is need to, I think, ensure that we focus on the triple nexus. This is critical. As a network, it's something that we've not been able to do extensively, but I believe that this is the time we're trying to see how we can lean and glean, and especially from our members who live in fragile states. Then we also need to focus on risk-informed programming that is building on the experiences of members in fragile states. So with that, I think I'd just like maybe like a brief background on the webinar and sort of the focus of the webinar today and what our objective is. So we find that as BJ has rightly mentioned, many GNDR members operate in fragile states and in contexts where democracy is unstable or under threat. The impact of climate change as well as other threats exacerbates this fragility. And as he mentioned, 58% of deaths from so-called natural disasters occur in the top 30 fragile states, with numbers of people affected often unreported or vastly underreported. For example, if I could just maybe name a few, we've seen armed conflicts in Sierra Leone, Democratic Republic of Uganda, and Uganda, just citing a few examples, whereby we've witnessed child combatants using small arms with ease. So what we've seen is that the experience of many GNDR members state that where countries are faced with violence and fragilities, that this increases their vulnerabilities to disasters. And it is very important to recognize how conflict in various forms drives vulnerability when designing conflict frontline risk reduction strategies. So the focus, I think, today is we're going to, I think, discuss a bit about small arms and light weapons, which are already present to a large degree in many societies. And I think we can attest to that. So the widespread availability of small arms, light weapons is a threat to human security because their presence encourages violence rather than peaceful ways of resolving problems and negates confidence and security building measures. In order to resolve problems and negate and risks, and to be able to build resilience, there needs to be greater understanding and identifying the various causes and triggers to conflict and ways to promote and advocate for peace building from the smallest community level. Conflict and socio-political confrontations also challenge the notion of the centrality of the state in establishing policies and mechanisms as a primary entry point to reducing risk. So what we are seeing is that there's a growing occurrence of fragility and conflict in different forms. Members are expressing an urgent need for our network to better understand and prioritize the link between conflict and risk-informed development. The issue of integrating development, humanitarian, peace-building actions is one that has gained relevance in the international space. And BJ had mentioned that the triple nexus. While the importance of the so-called triple nexus is well understood, its operationalization remains a challenge. So one of the things that we want to do is that we want to ensure that by the end of this webinar, we have a better understanding of conflict, but from a DRR perspective. And then we also want to share peace building strategies in tackling small arms and light weapons, but then looking at it from the lens of the the most risk-informed communities, the ones who are most vulnerable, and then also how can we share how communities can advocate and drive peace building initiatives, being that they are the ones who are at the forefront during such disasters. So one of the things that we also want to advocate is when we're analyzing risk, we have to ensure that we're assessing the complex threats people face, their vulnerabilities, and their capacities. Sustainable development can only be achieved when local risk is fully understood from the perspective of the communities most at risk. So in conclusion, I think what I can say is that when addressing issues of conflict, it is imperative to ensure that we include the communities most at risk and ensure that they are leading in this process. And here we have to ensure that we include all of the groups, the women, the elderly, the youth, the persons with disability, as well as all the other stakeholders, and ensure that they are included in the decision-making table. The communities at risk have the right to respond, and it is imperative we ask the people who are impacted directly or indirectly by conflict. So with that, I think I would like to maybe stop there and do a brief introduction to our first panelist, Mr. Kasim. So Mr. Kasim is actually Dr. Mohammed Hassan Kasim, and he has worked for the last 4 years as a board chairman for the Peace and Stable Building Institute, which is a charity organization devoted to promoting conflict resolution and peace building in the Somali regional states. He's also a member of the Peace and Unity Council, PUC, which is composed of traditional and religious leaders, academicians, and women in the Somali regional state of Ethiopia. Dr. Mohammed retired from the United Nations High Commission, UNHCR, in the mid-2015, whereby he'd been working there as a volunteer in various capacities. He has over 23 years of professional experience, and he's worked with UNHCR in various capacities, for example, managing complex operation in Eastern Sudan, looking at the successful repatriation of Southern Sudanese back home, which was the focus in 2018. He's also dealt with new arrivals, mainly from Somalia, South Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And in this, and his first connection, I think, with the issues of refugees was as an operational technical work with the Refugees Health Unit in Somalia and the Ministry of Health, which was then with UNHCR in Somalia. Dr. Mohammed holds a medical degree from Somali University School of Medicine and a master's in public health school system from the Sydney University, Australia. So I think I'd like to stop there and welcome Dr. Mohammed. If you could give us, he's going to provide an overview of what initiatives they have done from a community perspective, given the work that he's currently doing with SONAC. Dr. Mohammed, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I understand I can access my PowerPoint.
Would you like me to share the screen on your behalf?
Pardon?
I can present the screen on your behalf if that's okay.
That'll be fine as long as I see it, and then we can go through it. And let me first of all thank the organizers and indeed say to all of you, and welcome and have a good day. And what I'm going to present from the Somali region of Ethiopia, and goes back to almost a century of a conflict between the Somalis and various actors whom people saw them as colonizers. And therefore, the conflict started long with the British, Italian, French, and then with Menelik, who Somalis saw at that point in time as also as a colonizer, and then they tried to resist all these colonizers and to conserve their religion, values, what they consider as their own as Somalis. Therefore, and this long insecurity has taken its toll, and the Somali population resisted what they saw as a foreign, and the process preserved their culture, language, and religion. And after long fight in 2018, there was a change of government, and then they considered that change of government has brought to them for the first time some tranquility and to the region, and created peace building and development in the Somali region state. Can we move? Can we go ahead? Yes. And more recently, of course, there are conflicts ongoing among the Somalis themselves, and the other one, I think, yes, and the traditional conflict among the Somali group, and which was limited early on grazing, on competition over water resources, has taken a shape of practical shape and of sharing power and resources, and the interaction of the two has complicated the process. What used to be a very straightforward, which can be solved by the elders and the community, has now taken a practical shape, and where other parties are mainly guiding and manipulating the system. And traditionally, Somalis use also customary laws, but when that customary laws came against the statutory laws introduced by the government, the conflict between the two has brought new hazards, new risks, and with the increasing urbanization now, and the Somalis changing from the mainly pastoral to urbanization, the social transformation itself has brought a lot of new challenges and questions. Can we move forward? And therefore, with all these challenges, and the Somali civil society and SONSAC, Peace and Unity Council, the Somali civil society have joined hands with the government and to mainly conduct conflict resolution and peace building. And however, that has to go, and it is mainly firefighting, focusing on conflict resolution, while the crisis prevention and peace building lags behind. And there's also community-based radio, TV, which sought to promote dialogue and mainly promote awareness and of the community and increase civic education. In addition to that, the Somali regional state has formed a commission for reconciliation among the Somalis, and so that the people will come together and reconcile, solve problems among themselves so that they heal. And can we move forward? And in that case, there's a considerable progress made in the conflict resolution, somewhat in peace building. And on the other hand, the risk preparedness, disaster risk preparedness is ongoing separately, and progress has been made also in terms of preparation and response. And however, both policy and practice, the two areas of conflict, peace building and DRR, and running separately. And we need to really bring things together. And there is an awareness on that. There is a lot of advocacy, but that has to happen yet. Prevention or mitigation of conflict has not yet received the attention it deserves. And in addition, and I think all efforts are being made, but progress has to be made. In this case, the civil society, including SONSAC, and advocates very strongly to make the link, and given that disaster is one, and disaster risk reduction, conflict resolution, and a household livelihood are actually linked together, and as has been outlined, before me. Therefore, this is an area we are prioritizing as civil society, working with the government and to push for the progress. Can we move forward? And therefore, on the other hand, civil society is advocating for decentralization of conflict resolution and peace building, and most of the efforts focus or space it in the regional state, and while conflicts are happening in the districts and in the local communities. Therefore, while we go there, and we are working on a mechanism that we empower the local community so that they deal with their own conflicts and have the capacity and make prevention and increase peace building, and so that we work together, but actually the ownership will lie in the local community. And at the same time, capacity building of the local peace committees, covering the following area like building, conflict management, and social justice. And now civil society empowerment is our focus. Can we move forward? And therefore, as a civil society and the government together, we are working to actually enter our crisis prevention peace building in 3 areas. And in one area, we are working on, let me see. I don't see this. We are working to build. My screen is actually too, okay, hold on. We are working in 3 areas to improve structures, which is the base of the peace building, the base of the development, so that structures will improve the peace building. On the other hand, we are trying to increase to strengthen the capacity of those people who are working in conflict management and peace building by transforming violence, constituencies, promoting peace constituencies. But on the other hand, down there, we are trying to improve the coordination and awareness raising in the community, and trying to connect development with peace building and conflict resolution. Therefore, these are the 3 areas that we are working together as government and civil society, and so that we also engage the community at the local level. Can we move forward? Therefore, overall, this process of working for some time now in this area of peace building, conflict resolution, and bringing together the peace building and conflict resolution with DRR, disaster risk reduction, reduction. We have learned that participation of civil society, traditionally leaders and civil society organizations, and has improved the management, peace building, and has promoted risk-informed development and created confidence and participation of the society in these areas, and with improvement of governance in general. And therefore, this is something we have learned and something a lot of people has appreciated, and both the government, the civil society, and the community in general are working together to improve. The linkage between the conflict management, peace building, and risk-informed development is also coming to the fore. And our major challenge definitely is to convince the players to do risk analysis and incorporate these risk analysis into the development. And we are working on it, but it's a lesson learned, and the government is prioritizing this area. Awareness is increasing on the need to integrate conflict and hazard management and prevention in both policy and practice. Importance of harmonization between customary and statutory laws are also gaining ground. Let me stop at this last one, because the majority of our people, they live in the rural area, and the government systems do not reach them. Therefore, they know customary laws. That's what they deal among themselves. That's what they use for conflict resolution, and that is what they are using for a long period of time. Therefore, it comes normally against the statutory laws, and where the government is leading. Therefore, there is a lot of conflicts and a lot of gaps. We are trying to harmonize the two, one coming from the traditions, definitely entering from that line, but also eventually moving forward in a way that democracy prevails. Therefore,
Thank you so much.
This is where we
Thank
are.
you so much, Dr. Mohammed. You have, I think, given us quite a lot of very insightful nuggets about what the gaps or the challenges you have experienced with working with the communities, especially within your network, the local civil society organizations. And also you've provided some key insights. I think one of the things that I have managed to pick from your presentation was that there is need to empower local community, that we just cannot rely on the local state to be the ones who are promoting or advocating for peace. And this is similar to what I think I had mentioned and also what BJ had mentioned before. Also, you also mentioned, I think, issues of capacity building. And then also the fact that ownership lies with the local communities. So at the end of the day, even as we are providing the capacity building, the local community are the ones who have to take it upon themselves to ensure that they are the ones who are advocating for peace within their community. Then also, I think the other point you mentioned was there's need to integrate conflict and natural hazard management. There's been a gap, it's been dealt with separately, but we cannot look at it separately anymore. It has to be, everything is interlinked. Then there needs to be coherence between conflict, DRR. How do we ensure that there's advocacy? How do we strengthen the link between disaster risk reduction and conflict? Coming down to the household level. And last but not least, I think you had said that there's also need to harmonize traditional law and the statutory law. We can't have the two of them being done in isolation. So how can we ensure that we are merging the two, that we are learning from the experiences of both of them? So with that, I think, thank you for that. Again, for our audience, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A chat box. If you could also just maybe put in your questions, we'll have a bit of time at the end where you can be able to ask questions to Dr. Mohammed. I've seen quite a number of hands up, but for now, I'd like to introduce our second panelist who has joined us. Welcome, Mr. Rumongi. So Mr. Jean Bosco Rumongi holds a master's degree in diplomacy and strategic studies and has a first degree in social studies. He has a lot of work experience nationally and internationally, having served the past 20 years in the field of international diplomacy, peace and security with the United Nations peacekeeping operation in the West African region. And here we're looking at Cote d'Ivoire. We're looking at countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, I think Togo as well. He's handled consolidation of peace, humanitarian recovery process in both countries, and he has experience with the UN peacekeeping operations in Liberia and Cote d'Ivoire, working with civil society, government officials, traditional religious leaders, youth and women in promoting peace and restoration of state authority and social cohesion, gender and humanitarian actions. He's currently working as a resource mobilization specialist with UNITA in support of REXA joint programming. So with that, I think maybe if I could invite Mr. Jean Bosco, maybe just to give us a bit of your views based on your experience in the humanitarian sector. You've had a lot of experience working with in conflict-prone areas. So the floor is yours. Welcome. Mr. John Bosco, if you're able to unmute yourself, the floor is yours.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, you're welcome.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and the floor is yours, Mr. Rumongi.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn, of having me. And let me first and foremost apologize for my late arrival. I was caught up in Nairobi traffic. As everybody knows, Nairobi is very hectic at this particular hour. And Let me first and foremost, before I go into my presentation, remind that what I want to say on issues of small arms and light weapon in Africa and link it with the topic you are covering. I mean, just first to remind that there is a Security Council resolution 2370 of 2017, reaffirming the decision of resolution of 1373 of 2001, highlighting particular measures to eliminate the supply of weapons to those involved in terrorist acts. It is the first UN Security Council resolution specifically dedicated to addressing the linkage between terrorism and supply of wide range of weapons, including small arms and light weapons. Armed conflict and a higher level of armed violence represent a grave impediment to economic growth. There's nothing more damaging to our investment, climate, or armed insecurity. Its detrimental effects on poverty and on access to social services, development, and economic growth has profound impact on fundamental economy and social rights. Let me also point out that there are several important factors of vulnerability that terrorist groups can exploit to penetrate and establish themselves in communities, including social, political instability marked by electoral tension and a sense of abandonment and insecurity. The weak cooperation between population and the defense and security forces, the manipulation of community conflict, border porosity, and the insufficient opportunity for the youth and women considered as an easy prey for terrorist groups. The factors of vulnerability are exploited by these extremist, radical, or terrorist groups. Africa at large face many complex and interconnected security and development challenges, requiring a collective response from member states to sustainable address the key drivers of conflicts and instabilities from a human security perspective. A key conflict driver relates to illegal flows of small arms, which also result into cross-border armed conflict. One of the things that I may also highlight is that while in West Africa, we had one of the things that we did to address this issue of cross-border flow of arms and bringing also the community resilience was to establish what they call peace committees along the borders of Cote d'Ivoire and Liberia under what they call Mano River Union, where security apparatus in one hand and the communities are having forum of discussions at the community level to make sure that everything, and also serves as early warning and early response to conflict that may arise in any nature of conflict that may arise at the crossing borders and communities living across. You may find that in some countries, once you across the border, you may not even know your neighbor the other side, and the people also are also interlinked and interconnected. So this is something that I say that I should bring to the audience so that people can understand that the issue of small arms and light weapon, and also link it to diversion of arms and ammunition. Many countries in Africa, arms depots are not secure. You found these arms circulating in different countries, probably from the government stockpile. And so this is something that also fuel conflict. There is also something that I may want to bring to the attention of the audience is the culture associated with guns. We saw like pastoralists in most of the African countries using guns once they are protecting them once they are guarding their cows. And also, there is also the issue of when I talked about abandonment, there is also an issue of lack of state authority, where in some countries, people have never even seen a mayor. People have never seen even a governor. So people intend to arm themselves in some communities. We have seen it in many countries. So this is something that we can now discuss at large to see how people can find a remedy to this issue of the absence of the state in some countries have also led to people try to arm themselves, and which where we found that this conflict and the violence occur in community because people are, instead of leaving the state to protect the citizen, you found citizens trying to arm themselves. Something that we may also try to discuss. And there is a program that the international community and the African Union has putting in place under the Agenda 2016 and the strategic framework for the socio-economic transformation of the continent over the next 50 years, what they call silencing the gun in Africa. And which is one of the 12 flagships initiated instead of the Agenda 2013. And also there is also a protocol of the Lusaka Roadmap of 2016 lays out practical steps of achieving the Silence the Gun initiative. So all these implementation of regional instrument for small arms contract and the capacity building of states in this area are among the steps mentioned in the Lusaka Roadmap. So we need collectively the state, the community, to make sure that these things, all these international instruments are respected, and also at the same time, community are also implicated in designing and combating that we are seeing around the African continent. Without taking much of your time, I can maybe stop here, and I'm available for any question that may arise. And once again, I'm so sorry that I joined the conference, the webinar en route because of the traffic in Nairobi. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rumongi. I think you've given us quite a bit of insightful information, and I think what I've gotten from you, I think in as far as learning and best practices is similar to what I think has been shared. And I think what is coming out very strongly is a need to ensure that we have community participation. And when you were talking about the fact that you had set up peace committees between the border of Cote d'Ivoire and Liberia, and in this way they were able to ensure that they were controlling like the small arms traffic. They were able to establish dialogue. You've also mentioned, I think, capacity building and ensuring how we can have collective and community adhering to the international instruments. How can they design and combat and integrate some of these laws? So with that, I think there are a few questions that have been asked. Maybe I could ask them. So the first one is, and I think I'll go to you, Dr. Mohammed. Conflict, disaster-induced development choices involves trade-off. I'm interested to learn how you can navigate this when states and state-related actors are the one generating conflict. So, Dr. Mohammed, if you're able to answer that very quickly, and then I'll go to the next two other questions.
And I think in our case, and at the end of the day, the community and the state have to interact, and the civil society has to come up and definitely work with the government and in the case of there is something that needs to be corrected, come up and be able to engage. In the case where then there is an armed and they cannot do very much about it, then often there is another force that comes in to help. But in our case, in Somaliland, in many other places, when the conflict comes, it's the community which stands up and actually works with the parties to resolve that conflict. And at the end of the day, our traditions and community elders work and they are strong. And in any case, there should be the responsibility lies on the community, on the civil society, and they work with the government in that case.
Thank you so much. And I think just to add to your comment about ensuring that we work with communities, there's a comment here from one of our participants that you have confirmed for me the similarities in the conflicts in the countries of the global south. So what they're saying is that your presentation has put us in direct line with what is happening in our country, Colombia. And thank you, these are great challenges. So my second question, I think, would go to Mr. Rumongi, is how do we put down the weapons of terrorists?
Oh, that is that is really queer question. How do you put down the weapon of terrorists? It is also to cut the supply routes. And we have also, in our research, what we have noticed is that terrorists take advantage of the vulnerability of our communities. Like in West Africa, where I've been operating from, they use small projects to win the hearts and mind of. They use small projects to win the hearts and mind of the vulnerable population, especially where there is no administration. So to lay down the weapon of terrorists, it's also to protect our stockpile, protect the arms depot, the storage facilities. Most of these arms don't fall from heaven; they come from somewhere. So that's why, like in our engagement with stakeholders, we have projects to secure arms and ammunition so that they don't fall under in wrong hands. So that is the only route, I think, for us to cut the supply route of terrorists, is to protect our arms depot and make sure that also these arms not also protect, they are marked, they are traced whenever they are what they call tracing mechanism to put in place, and every government official or any state government-owned guns are marked and traced so that these arms cannot find themselves in the hands of terrorists. I think this is something that we can also collectively, yes.
Thank you so much for that. I think, again, we've gotten some additional comments and maybe just I think there's a question that has been asked, has education contributed to the fight against armed conflict? And I think based on both presentations, you've both mentioned the need and the importance of doing capacity building and capacity building, providing the communities most at risk, like with the information, with the knowledge, with the skills, because they are the ones who are normally most affected. Yes, in times
we do the public awareness. We also have project on disarm the hearts and mind public awareness using sports and community radios.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think then with that, maybe I would like to maybe conclude. And I guess just to summarize, I think like the presentations that we've had, so far, from when BJ started at the beginning of the hour to Dr. Mohammed and to Mr. Rumonge, I think what comes out very clearly is that in order to ensure that there is peace, especially in areas that are conflict prone, it is vital to ensure that we include the communities most at risk in advocating for these initiatives. We cannot we cannot rely on the state alone to be the ones who are advocating for peace. It has to start at the community level because they are the ones who are most directly affected. So with that, I think I would like just to draw the webinar to a close. And as BJ had mentioned in the beginning, that in partnership with the International Institute of Social Studies, which is led by Thea, who's one of our board members, we have developed a course When Disaster Meets Conflict. I think the link for the course had been shared before, and we can share it again. So this is an online free course that everyone is welcome to register and actually go through it. And it's mainly, I think, primarily meant for practitioners. So it's quite relevant for our members, especially given that conflict is it is a new topic. I think for some of us, it's something that we are living in areas that are very fragile is something that we deal with every day. Then finally, maybe just to end, I'd like to announce that we'll be having another webinar. As I mentioned, that this is a series of webinars under the Local Leadership Academy. So the next webinar, the topic will be on forced displacement. And this will be on the 9th of December from the 1400 hours to 1500 hours GMT. And we'll have English, French, and Spanish interpretation. So just a bit about forced displacement. Forced displacement is on the rise, and I think when we think about that, we've just been talking about conflict, it is very linked. So with the average length of displacement at over 20 years, the majority of displaced are living in informal urban settlements. It is critical that displaced people are able to build their resilience, not just see the short-term needs met in emergency response. So this webinar is going to give an overview of the work of GNDR members in collection of data alongside those at risk of displacement, working with multiple stakeholders as essential to finding durable solutions, and will conclude with the presentation of the Norwegian Refugee Council Word into Action resource, which aims to ensure that future DRR strategies include disaster displacement risk. It'll also be an opportunity to enable participants to understand relevant tools and key actions that can be taken to ensure that those at risk of displacement are central to decisions made about preparedness, response, and seeking long-term and durable solutions to the risks they face. So that's just like a brief synopsis about the upcoming webinar. And it is, I think, like it'll be an exciting add-on to the webinar that we've just had on conflict. I know we've not been able to fully unpack conflict because conflict is very, very diverse, and it is a very diverse topic. But I think with that, I'd like to close the webinar and end it here. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your participation. And with that, I think I'd like to say have a good evening and have a nice, for those who are starting the day, have a nice rest of the day. For those who are ending the day, have a nice rest of the evening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.